You're listening to the Educate, Enable and Empower Show, a podcast from the Scottish Women's Development Forum in which we sit down with inspiring women and others to listen to their stories, life lessons and perspectives.
Welcome to Breaking Barriers, a special episode in honour of International Women's Day. We're embracing the theme of inspiring inclusion and the UN call to invest in women and accelerate progress. Today, we have Kayleigh Marshall from Police Scotland interviewing Deputy Commissioner Tania Kura by Lake Taupo, New Zealand. Let's delve into the remarkable journey of Deputy Commissioner Kura and her contributions to policing. Deputy Commissioner Tania Kura joined police in 1987. She has over 35 years' experience in the New Zealand Police Force. In July of 2017, she was made Eastern District Commander, being responsible for Hawke's Bay, Gisborne and the east coast of the North Island within New Zealand. Deputy Commissioner Kura has relentlessly focused on the development of her people and building a strong and positive culture within policing. She is highly regarded by the community and her staff. In 2020, she became the first female police officer to be appointed to the position of Deputy Commissioner. It is with great honour and pleasure that I am here today with Deputy Commissioner Kura in Taupo Police Station. You joined policing at a time when the representation of women in policing was a lot lower. Over the years, this has been steadily improving. Have you faced any challenges as a woman in policing, and how have you overcome these challenges?
Interesting question. So if you think about joining the police in the late 80s and what society expected as well, I guess my career's probably mirrored a lot of those things. So I think about my career in three different parts. So those early years, probably fitting in is the focus, that you don't want to be different, you want to fit in and kind of you behave in a way that makes you maybe is a bit challenging for your own values and things like that. So for me, it was a bit about fitting in, and I was maybe subjected to some things that I look back on now and go, gosh, actually, that's just actually barbaric, and I'm not that keen on the way the organisation treats us. But I guess the second part of that is a bit about finding my voice. But my early career, the challenges is that there was no female role models as such, so there wasn't anyone. I started in a big metro city, lots of women on section, and so I kind of saw what a good cop looked like, not necessarily what a good female cop looked like, but I just saw what good cops looked like, and there was a bigger choice. After a year, I transferred into provincial New Zealand, which was quite different, and there were, I was the only woman on a section. In fact, in our general duties, the response team that I worked in, we might have only had 2 or 3 women in the whole station. So you'd have 100 cops and maybe only 2 or 3 women. At that particular time, I had seen differences between metro and provincial, and had kind of worked out that, actually I like this type of work. I'm actually, probably because you have a different communication style, get different results from the men. And I don't have to be physical about what I do, you just have to be persuasive. So that was probably a thing that you kind of learn about yourself. But when I went into the smaller station, there were some things that I kind of really didn't like. So things like, I remember being in a meal room and the way that my male colleagues were speaking about their partners and about women in general. And I thought, I haven't actually experienced this before. So, and I challenged a couple of these guys. I was the most junior person on the section at that time. And so, with only a year's service, listening to people talk about women in a really derogatory way. And I knew their partners, and the way that they talked about them, I was quite horrified. So I kind of made a stand and said, I'm not going to eat with you guys, and I'm not going to join the meal room if you're going to continue to talk about people like that. And so I would have my meal in the muster room, while they had their meal in the meal room. So at the start, that became a bit of a laugh about, you think you're too flash for us and things like that. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And then after a while, my colleagues said to me, actually, we don't like their talk either. And actually, we'd rather have you in the meal room. And I said, well, you need to say something, because I'm not coming back in while that behaviour continues. And so I guess it's that making a stand for myself. Yes, you ostracise yourself a little bit, but it also means that actually just get on with being a good cop. Everyone gets to know you for the way you do your job, not for the stand you've made. And then as it turned out, you're able to kind of, not on my watch, you don't get to talk like that around Tania when she's in the room, or if she'll have and I guess it's I don't know what makes me any different, or I think it's maybe easier to do that now, but back in the 80s, that was probably a little bit foreign because mostly you want to fit in. Yeah. So I think challenges start in that way. The other challenges are I had wanted to, I think for females you want to please and you are very diligent and things like that. So I was single, didn't have any sort of commitments. So I had done my probationary modules that you do in your first couple of years really quickly, studied hard, got that done. And so I decided, well, actually, I think I'll do my promotional exams while I've got the time, while I don't have any commitments. And so I applied to do those and I was turned down. And the area commander at the time, who's the inspector, said to me, actually, you can't do them, you're too new and it's not like you're going to get a job. And I said to him, I don't particularly want a job, but I know that it's probably a 4-year process. That's what it used to be, a 4-year process. So I just want to keep learning. And he wouldn't let me. And so I remember thinking to myself, like, actually, why is that? And then, but the comments that I got from other people were, well, it's not like you're really going to be a sergeant, so I don't know why you want to do that. And I'm like, why can't I be a sergeant? Just because there haven't been any before, and there've never been any female sergeants in my whole region. And it was really interesting. He moved, and so I just did them anyway. And so it's kind of interesting about just because someone says no, it might be no for a moment, but I kind of think there's a piece about pushing the boundaries, and I can talk about that a little bit later if you like. But it's just a really interesting thing for me about when you know what's right, you kind of should do it anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% agree with that. So
yeah. So challenges and barriers, I can talk lots about those, but I guess it's how you face barriers. What I would say is how you react when you don't get what you want is really important.
And what would you say is that, I mean, for you, from what you found is the best reaction to that for breaking barriers like this? When obviously someone said no to you, kind of went away and then you tried again and you did that a different way. Was there kind of something in your mindset that made you stop and think, or were you kind of, I mean, like any kind of woman, you maybe feel that urge to want to go? Any person really, you have an urge that you want to succeed?
No, the biggest thing for me is I have a really strong sense of fairness. And so fair and unfair. So I'm okay if something makes sense and logical and there's risk and stuff in there, but I can't go the unfairness piece. And so one of the experiences that I probably call out, which is more recent, is that somebody had said to me, well, actually, it's 2 parts to it. The first part is I applied for a role and I missed out on the role. And I didn't worry about the person that got the job, but I kind of feel like when they rang me to say that I didn't get the role, I was like, oh, great, look, was so happy to get an interview. Thank you so much. Is there anything that you think I should work on? And I'm sure that you've got the best person for the job and that by interviewing me, I was capable, but that's kind of how I've seen it. Now, the person who was giving me that feedback said, he was really surprised because the way I wanted to leave him was thinking, you know what, maybe we didn't make the right choice, or maybe there's something more about her. And so I think the way you react to when you get that type of news is really important. And I've always made sure if I've missed out on something, and in my early days I really wanted to make people go, damn, we didn't pick the right person, and make it your loss, not mine. And that's how I look at every opportunity. If something doesn't happen, it's because it's meant to be. And actually it's your loss, not my loss. I've gained an experience, you've lost. So I think that kind of, and I haven't consciously held that as a philosophy, but that's how it works for me.
Yeah. I love that. That's I think it's a really a good way to kind of look at things and and go through that. So we'll move on to segment 2, which is leadership and culture. So in Scotland, we have seen a focus recently on police and culture, and there is a real drive to promote an inclusive culture where everyone feels that they are valued and belong. Deputy Commissioner Kura, could you share how you have successfully implemented cultural changes within the New Zealand Police?
So I think because I've been a leader for probably now about 2000 was my first leadership role. So I probably think more consciously about the things around culture now than I did early in my journey. Became most obvious to me when I was an area commander, which was about 10 or 12 years ago, about what culture meant and the difference it makes. And I look at, so diversity is the thing that brings out the best in all of us. So if you think about a police station, when kids come into the police station, we all behave so much better. When there's a diverse room or there's people that you don't know nearly as well, we behave better in those circumstances. So I'm really mindful of diversity is actually a really good, is kind of like good cholesterol in the culture space. But the other thing that I think is actually really important is the way we treat people when they make a mistake. And I think that says more about your culture than anything. So if you've got a blame culture where everyone's shit scared to make a mistake, it means that they don't open up to you. And so I've always been in a position where if you tell me what's wrong or you've made a mistake and you're open and honest about it, I think we can solve the problem together. You will still need to be accountable for your problem, but actually we can deal with it together and whatever might come to you. And I guess that's probably a parenting analogy for me as well, is that I look at my children and think to myself, if they do whatever the worst thing they could possibly do, I will always still love them and we'll deal with it together, but they have to tell the truth. So I feel like that's the piece for me in culture is about when we make a mistake, how do we treat people? And you have to open up to be able to do that. Now, interestingly, I learnt a very good lesson in this for myself. So I made a mistake when I was driving a police car, failed to indicate, somebody overtook me at the same time, and I had a crash. So I was charged in open court and with careless use, careless use causing it didn't cause an injury, but just careless driving. Really low level. Most members of the public don't get charged because you kind of write it off to experience. But I was charged and I was kind of happy to admit that I'd made a mistake. But I said, well, the other person made a mistake too, but you haven't charged him. The excuse I was given is that you're an area commander. We've got to be seen to be doing something about this. So you need to be accountable. And I'm like, well, actually, I disagree. We wouldn't do that. So I had this discussion with my boss and with the organisation about this. In the end, they charged me and I just pleaded guilty. I said, no, that's fine. I'm not going to put any energy into being negative. The consequences won't be so dire, but I will take. But what I learned from that is the way that we treat people when they make a mistake and how it was all across the media, whole lot of negative publicity about it, people saying, why hasn't she done this, done that, and lots of judgment that went around it. And that was a really good lesson for me. Because then when I became the district commander, which was the area commander's boss a few years later, I took that particular lesson and then I was able to apply it in a different way. And it's actually a leadership piece for me. So I then had a situation where somebody else made a mistake and actually I didn't throw them under the bus in the same way and was able to fight for this particular person, and it was a drink driving matter. Yes, there are consequences, but when I listened to that person and them tell me exactly what had happened, I went, this is a double whammy. These people get slammed in the media. They have a whole lot of consequences because they're cops. But actually, they've worked for us for 30 years and never made another mistake. On the day I can understand what happened, actually, I'm prepared to give them a chance. The interesting thing about that, giving that person a chance and treating them differently than anybody else had, is that the whole district turned around and went, gosh, actually, we can trust the boss to do what's right by us. Instead of going to the union and asking for their advice and having an adversarial relationship, having the person turn off, he had to face the consequences of the court, but the organisation supported him, and I supported him to stay working for us. Yes, he had some other consequences, but I think the fact for me is that everybody else said, well, you'll get a fair go, and yes, you might have to face your consequences, but you will won't be treated so harshly and judged. And I think that actually makes a difference to culture, and that you create an environment where people want to please and actually just want to come clean and tell you what's going on.
Yeah, I love that. That's really, and it's refreshing as well to hear that. So,
It's hard for bosses to have the courage to put themselves up for that. And interestingly, when I put it to my bosses that I was going to do this because it had never been done before, no one wanted to sign and acknowledge it. And so I kind of considered to myself, what would be the one thing I would lose my job for? And I kind of went, actually, I would lose my job for this, for making this decision. And that's the piece. I thought if I ever get the sack for anything, I want it to be for something that's actually doing the right thing by people. And so that was probably, and that's not, I didn't frame it in that way, but in my own head, that was definitely my rationale behind it, that actually if this is such a bad thing and I lose my job for it, that's okay.
I know, yeah, that's I said before, I think it's really refreshing hearing that, but you are right in what you're saying, because there's other people in the world that might turn around and say, well, actually, I don't think I'd have that kind of executing those decisions behind that. So no, it's definitely a refreshing kind of take. What do you believe that leadership plays in shaping organisational change, so especially in a dynamic environment like policing?
I think the thing for leadership is, it's interesting, it's probably knowing your people. And so these days when I talk about the role of leadership in policing, I kind of talk to leaders about, like, you have permission to care. When you care for your people and you understand them, it is amazing the discretionary effort that you get from them. And so policing's a hard job. The things about, I used to have a boss that he would always praise us when his boss was around. And I remember talking to him one day and saying, you know what, actually, I don't agree with that. I said, I would rather that you said thank you to me when there's just the two of us in a room, because then I would know that you meant it. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, are you questioning my sincerity? And I said, actually, I guess I am. And I feel like that's the piece for me, is that, like, actually, it's a bit like, you can praise in front of people because some people like that, but it's the things about what you do in private and what you do all of the time that really count. And so it's like, so what are you known for? Like, what do people know that actually I can come and talk to you about this, and if you say it's going to be private and confidential, I can trust you when you don't say anything? They're really key. Actually, do you care for me in a way that you're present when we are talking, when I tell you about things? Do you remember my partner's name, or the fact that I've got a kid that does this, or that my mother's sick, or something like that? Those are things that really count in the leadership journey. And I think that if I think about the organisation I grew up in through the 80s and 90s, even in the 2000s, that wasn't a feature of it. But for me as a leader, having watched the difference that makes with my people, I'd go hands down, that's the way to get the best out of your people, is just care for them sincerely and genuinely. Amazing things will happen.
Are there any specific goals or milestones that you aim to achieve in terms of cultural development within the New Zealand Police? So is there anything currently sitting right now? Sounds to me that you're doing a fantastic job, but is there anything else that you're driving for right now?
Yeah, well, we're an evolving model. Like, I think that 2024, no better time to be a woman in police. No better time to be a woman in New Zealand Police, but no better time to be a woman in policing. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Are there still challenges for us to overcome? Of course there are. But I guess it's the part about valuing everyone's skills, so women or men. I look at some of my male colleagues along the way, and some of them that have been a bit different to probably the alpha traits that they were recruited on, they don't get a fair suck of the sav either. They don't get a good chance to be themselves. So what I would think is the chance for everybody to truly be themselves, and for us to genuinely value that. I guess the challenge we've got in New Zealand Police, and I'm not sure if it's the same in Scotland, is we've got a couple of different generations pushing against each other within our workforce. So we've got a younger workforce that's probably up to about 30 years old. We've got another part of the workforce that's got a peak at about early to mid-50s. It's almost like parent-child type of relationship. The ones that are in their 50s and above are generally the supervisors or senior supervisors of those younger ones who have got different expectations. And so there's a real cultural push there. And what I'd like to think is that actually they could both learn from each other would be the best option. Those experienced ones have got something to offer. The young ones have got something to offer as well. And actually the blending of them would be the best outcome for the organisation. But at the moment, there's still, in some places, there is too much ego involved. And I think that's the thing that holds us back the most is ego and maybe a sense of entitlement because I've earned it from our older colleagues is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. And it's also one probably part to say there is that learning is never over.
Absolutely.
No matter where you go in your career, it's always going to be at the forefront of your mind of wanting to carry on learning what you're doing. So, okay. So, and then what have been the biggest challenges that you've encountered in implementing any of these cultural changes, and how have you overcome any of the challenges that have been met?
So there's the ones that you put on yourself. I think that there's challenges that you have for yourself that I can't do. And so I guess it's a little part about, for me, working out, like, I'm not going to be the top of anything in particular. I'm not going to be the best or I've been a couple of firsts, but it's kind of like only because nobody's made a decision before that. But I think some of those bigger challenges are getting over yourself. And what I've worked out in that space is it's probably my conscience about what I'm prepared to be sacked for. And that's kind of like, maybe that's just how I think about it is. And speaking out isn't one of them. So I think that understanding that when you are, so there's the difference between being right and doing the right thing. And so as I've got more comfortable about doing the right thing, I think that's actually been one of the biggest challenges that I've overcome. So when I think about that, so you can do what's right and say, right, that's the policy, you needed to follow it. We always do it this particular way. So that's fine, but having the courage to do the right thing is always better. And I think that that's the thing for me that I would like to probably challenge leaders around, especially in policing, because we're never going to treat the communities in the same way if we can't treat our own fairly and with compassion and care. How would our communities ever expect that from us? So I think that that's the key part is we have to model inside the organisation how we want to be outside the organisation. So it's an interesting challenge for all of us. The other challenges is probably, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, being told no, you can't. And so I go, how much of a hard push is that? So, for example, when I became the district commander for Eastern District, the person who was the chair of the panel said to me, we never appoint from within. So if you've already been an area commander in a particular place, you can't be the district commander in that same place. We don't do that. It's not how it works. So I applied anyway. And he said to me, so I'm telling you, you're not going to get the job. And I said to him, that's great. I'm fine with that because I've got nothing to lose. And I think that I could do with the practice because I think in the future I might like to be a district commander. So I'm just going to challenge the process, but I'm also going to apply because I think that I've got nothing to lose. So I applied for this particular role and I got it. Now, I was really interested because he had also told the panel members, which I found out later, that I was not to get the job because they'd never done it before. So what I found out from the panel is when I had been interviewed, and of course, because you go in with nothing to lose, I guess you are a whole lot more open and honest and relaxed. And they said to me, like at the end of the interview process, it was kind of like there was nobody else to choose. And so this person had to change the thing that had always been. And I go, if I hadn't challenged it, if I had just gone along with what he had said to me is you're never going to get it. And I was really surprised. I had never thought he would change his mind. Wasn't a person known for changing his mind, and he'd been very assertive. But I'm like, well, actually, I'm going to challenge you anyway. So I think there's a little bit about some challenges are sometimes they're there to be broken. Have a crack anyway.
Sounds great. And then just moving to segment 3, which is women in policing. So Deputy Commissioner Kura, reflecting on the current landscape for women in policing today, what opportunities exist and what challenges do you think they face? And earlier on you were saying that's a great time to be a woman in policing, but would you say there are any, there obviously are challenges in policing for women, but I'll let you answer.
So if I think about reflecting on opportunities and challenges now, like the biggest challenge I think is there's a piece about entitlement that sits behind. For some people, think that they're entitled to have some things. I would say is you have to work hard, especially if you like I've got 3 children, I've got 2 grandchildren now. My children have all been born when I was in policing. And in those days, I think I was probably one of the first to come back to work when I'd had my children. And we never had flexible employment for when my first 2 were born, which is when you can do work part-time. We didn't have that in those days. And so I had to work full-time, and I worked shift work, and I did all of those things. And so what I would say is that it's really hard. And yes, I had to get up early. I had to get my washing done before I went to work. I had my shopping list sorted for when I was going to either go to the supermarket on the way home. I had, the kids had to have their homework. Everything was in a rush, and it was a well-oiled machine. And it was really busy. And I didn't have any family supporting me in that particular town. And so, 3 young children, it's a really, really busy time. But what I would say is it's made my children really resilient. They thank me for the way that they were brought up. My daughter with children has said to me, Mum, she said, I love the fact that actually we were independent and had to look after each other. So it's a really interesting thing for me about it is just busy. Get on and do it. Your children don't stay little forever, but you can have both. And I remember when I went to my area commander job, which is at inspector level, when I went to the area commander role, somebody said to me, you have to take 10 years out of your career if you want to have children. And I said to them, well, I should put my children back then because actually, I've got 3 of them. And at that point, I think my youngest was about 13 or 14. And it's like, I don't agree. Yes, I had to be up if I wanted to study, I had to get up earlier. Actually, I didn't go out on weekends. I haven't watched TV for years. It's kind of like it's that type of thing. Actually, just work out what's important to you. And before you know it, it's over, actually. Before you know it, they are growing up and you have grandchildren. So I kind of think that the challenges for women are probably time-bound. It does get easier. Use the support of the network around you. That's the opportunity that sits there with you. And actually talk to those other ones, like work together to find solutions for things. If you've got a group of young mums around you, you can all work together to make that better. Someone can do the pick-up, somebody else can do a drop-off. It's a lot easier and your kids will love you for it.
Love that. That's brilliant. I mean, obviously that is something that's kind of facing a lot of women, and I know that going back to Scotland, that's, colleagues, even myself, I'm a young mum, so it's very much trying to know you can still have a career and also support your family. And now we've obviously got the flexible working. Would you still almost kind of give mums in policing the option? Would you kind of support them to be flexible working, and do you think that would set them back at all? Or
well, I don't know, because I never had the opportunity to do that. And I see my mother had worked as well, so I didn't know any different. But I guess we established our routines around the fact that we were. I was always, it was because their dad was in the police as well. So between the 2 of us working shift work and things like that, we had to try and make things work. But I would go, so the flexible work piece to me means actually you can have a bit of both and get a bit more balance in it. And so just know that it's only for a portion. I don't know if you have your whole career working part-time that you would expect to have the same outcomes as if somebody had been working full-time the whole time. I think that might be a bit of a stretch for those that are making it work. But I think that there is a stage that you probably need to have some balance in there. And there are a lot more. I mean, my oldest daughter's 31. So if you think back 30 years ago, probably there's a lot more pressure on people to be doing more things. And I think that that's a little bit of a reflection on, life was a little bit simpler maybe in those days. But still the same pressures of being a mum and trying to make it all work.
It's all different challenges, but as we talked earlier on, it's about also changes that have happened in policing over the years too, which has a big impact on that as well. What advice would you offer to women who aspire to leadership roles within policing? Is there anything that kind of key points you would give them?
Yeah, I would say do it early. So if you are looking for promotion, so my younger children, so I never promoted until I had been in the police for 12 years. Now, interestingly, that's because probably the way that I was treated early in my career, I was never given opportunities, and every time I applied for something, I was turned down. It's like, we don't have women in those jobs. So I was turned out at the investigations branch, where you can't come in, we've never had a woman detective, so you can't possibly do this. You can't go away on that investigation because you've got children, all of those sorts of things. What I would say, my advice to women now would be, if you want promotion and you want rank, do it early. So when my youngest daughter was 5, I was a senior sergeant. So we have a sergeant, then senior sergeant, then inspector. So I was a senior sergeant. Life was so much easier for me when I was a senior sergeant. When I was a constable, I was at the whim of my sergeant and my senior sergeant, and I had no flexibility. But when I was in a ranking position, like I went on school trips with her, I did a whole lot more with her than I ever could with my other children because I had rank. And it just meant I had flexibility. I mean, she broke her arm and I had a week off work with her, but I kept working from home well before working from home was a thing to do. And people just came to my house and we did our meetings, or I did things like that. I could never have done that if I was a constable. Mm-hmm. So when I look back now, I'd go, I don't regret the way that I did it, but I did think to myself, actually, if I'd had rank earlier, it probably would have been easier to balance my family stuff. So there is something in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do kind of agree with you on that one as well. I do think maybe there's opportunities out there, but there's also, I think, from our kind of side of things, we've got different departments to move into as well. Yep. So you've got the sideway moves that hopefully also help, but from what it sounds is, CID investigation branches that maybe were saying to women back then in the day, saying actually, well, we've never had a woman before, so there's not an opportunity for you to come in here. What would you say would be your most memorable part of the job? Would you say there's something that kind of stands out for you with your time in service?
I think for me, the time in policing that I maybe enjoyed and probably learnt the most about myself is my first leadership role. So as I say, I'd been in the police for 12 years, and then I was promoted to a frontline sergeant, and I had a new team. And so you get people, who are straight out of police college and are finding their way in the organisation. And I think the thing that I found out about that was I got the chance to look after them in a way to get the best out of each one of them. And so I learned as much about them as I did about myself, and knowing that my style for that particular person didn't work with the next one or the next one or the next one. So you had to really individualise the way that you dealt with different things. And I was really thoughtful about how I would pair people up to work together to make sure that they both could do their very best. So when I look back on that frontline leadership role, it was about, I probably did more learning about putting people into a situation, seeing how they went, debriefing it in my own sort of simple way, and thinking, right, next time we're going to try this combination. And maybe that's where I got probably a lot more success than most do in those roles, because they can be really stressful. But it was able to and I feel like, to be honest, most of that is about being a mum, and that most of my leadership lessons have come from being a mum, because I look at my children and think they aren't the same, that 3 of them are quite different, and that you need a different style with each of them to be able to grow and thrive. And so you learn and adjust. And so I kind of feel there's lots of parallels between the leadership journey of being a mum and being a leader in the workforce. But as that frontline sergeant, I felt that quite stimulating, and was excited to be there. And also you had the part about work was always unpredictable and kind of like quite challenging, but it meant there was way more satisfaction. So it's a long time ago now, but I do think of that as quite a good time in my policing career.
Brilliant. That's amazing. Thank you so much. And I can close it there. Do you have anything else to add, or would you?
No, if I do think about it, I think for women in policing is kind of be careful what you wish for. Don't be in such a hurry that you miss the enjoyment of the job. It's a great job. And the other thing is that enjoy all of your colleagues. Like we have as many men out there that are challenged by the policing environment as there are women. And I think that take a little bit from each of those people that you see are good and work on your credibility every day. It doesn't matter what it is that you do. Think about how it's going to be perceived by others and actually always do it for doing the right thing. And I think that will actually stand you in good stead for the long term. So that's just, what you're known for is actually really important.
Amazing. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Tania Kura. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to meet you today here across the TWPO in New Zealand. So thank you so much for your time.
Lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Kayleigh.
To our listeners, let's take today's conversation as a call to action. Reflect on the importance of diversity and inclusion in leadership, support and promote initiatives that empower women in leadership positions. Together, we can make a difference, not just on International Women's Day, but every day.
Thank you for tuning in to Breaking Barriers. Join us next time as we continue to share stories that challenge the status quo and inspire change.
This has been a TwaBoldLassies production for the Scottish Women's Development Forum.